Hello everyone, I hope you are well. My name is GLASYS, I also go by GLASYS. Today I'm going to be showing you a composition that I created using Soundpaint's new Adastra string library. Now when Trolls asked me if I'd like to compose a piece with this new library, I was very excited because I had heard what it can do. I was really excited to see how the legato works and how all the different articulations come together, and I must say that it exceeded my expectations, and they were quite high to begin with. There's something about this library that is just so expressive and natural and just inspiring to use, and it's not hard to get something that sounds great with it. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a listen to the composition in its entirety, and then I'll break it down a bit, tell you how I composed it, how I used Adastra to create this. And just so you know, I'm using Cubase, and all you're hearing is Soundpaint. There are, of course, many instances of Soundpaint used for every one of the different instruments, but there's no additional processing. Even the reverb comes from within Soundpaint. Okay, I'm going to play it now. Hope you enjoy, and we'll talk about it later. So that's it. I spent quite a lot of time on this composition, around a week of work, I think. And I'm quite happy with the way it turned out, and I hope you enjoyed it. So let's talk a little bit about how I created this and how I used Adastra. First of all, I gotta say that this string library is so good that it doesn't take that much effort to get it to sound the way you want to. And there are many different articulations you can choose from. One of the cool additions to Soundpaint is also the key switches rack, which lets you basically create multiple programs within one, and you can use key switches to switch between the different samples. So what I actually did for this composition is, rather than have a different instance of Soundpaint for every single articulation, I created 2 programs for every instrument. So there are 2 programs for violin, 2 for violas, 2 for cellos, 2 for double basses, and a few extras, which I'll talk about later. Okay, so let's open the violin, for example. As you can see, I have the key switches rack open. So I have these 4 keys over here, changing 4 different sets of samples. And I'm using 2 different slots for every articulations, one with the close mic and one with the far mic. First of all, here's a legato articulation. As you can see, I'm also using the mod wheel quite a bit, and these samples have dynamics built into them. So you can control the dynamics of your instrument very naturally just by using the mod wheel. Now, in addition to that, I'm also using some modulation, as you can see right over here. I'm modulating the volume of the far mic and also a little bit of the close mic, just to kind of emphasize these dynamics a little bit more. One thing I'd like to point out is that you don't have to play monophonically using legato, which is very cool. You can play in octaves. You can still play chords. But if you play a monophonic line, you don't have to kind of switch back and forth. Even if you're just using the legato articulation, you can still play polyphonically, and it sounds very natural. Okay, back to the key switches. So on this key right here, I've got a sustain patch. On this one over here, we are using staccatos. And right over here, we got spiccatos. So that's the first violin program that I'm using. And then on the second violin program, I've got other articulations. Okay, so number 1 is portamento, which is just like a really slow legato where the notes kind of glide into each other, which is gorgeous. Once again, I'm controlling the dynamics using the mod wheel, and it just sounds so expressive and beautiful. It's got that kind of, I don't know, like really passionate vibrato Hollywood tone to it. I love it. And you can still play polyphonically. So awesome, so beautiful. I don't know how they did this, but I just absolutely love it. All right, and then on this key switch right here, I've got pizzicatos. What else? What else we got? All right, on this key switch, I'm using tremolos. Once again, dynamics are just so smooth. And on the last key switch, I have got a a trill, a minor second trill. And I only use this in a couple of spots in the composition, but I thought it sounded really cool. And that's basically it. That's the violin. So I've got these two programs for the violin, and then I've got a similar thing going on for the other instruments as well. Violas, same thing. We have legatos, sustains, marcatos, here are the spiccatos. This sounds gorgeous and lush. Okay, that's the violas, same thing with the cellos, legatos. And sustains. Marcatos. Spiccatos. And so on and so forth. And then we have the basses, similar deal, okay, for everything. Right here at the bottom, I've got a few extra patches that I use just to kind of double some parts and also fill out some parts that felt like they needed a little something extra. So we've got some extra legato patches. This is actually a patch that was created by Trolls, I believe. Yes, and it's a gorgeous legato patch. And it's got violins, violas, and cellos and basses all in this one program using key splits, so you can play the entire string ensemble just using this one patch, which is really cool. I'm using that just to double a few parts, which we'll talk about soon. I've got another one that I'm using for extra legatos. And in addition to that, I have this sustain patch right here. Just to add a little bit of depth to one part in the composition. Actually, a few different parts. And then the very last tracks are just used for one part in the intro. So it's interesting. When I first created this intro, I didn't have these, and I just used the regular tracks. But there's this one part right here, which you can hear. The bass is on it as well. So what I did over there, when I first sent it to Trolls, he said that the legato could maybe be a little kind of faster and snappier, and he suggested I try to use the time rack, which is also a new addition to Soundpaint that, if I'm not mistaken, what it does is it just speeds up the samples or the transitions between samples, so it made this legato run sound more natural because the legato, the transitions are faster, and it's really cool to experiment with it, and you can also modulate the different parameters in it, which is very cool. Yeah, so that was a good idea that Trolls gave me over there, and it does sound better than it did when they were just on the regular legato tracks. So you can definitely mess with the time rack to get a more natural sounding legato when you need, I don't know, some really fast runs, especially when there are big intervals in the legato, I think. But, you know, it really depends on the composition and your individual needs. Okay, now let's break down the composition a bit. So first of all, the intro. All right, now, as you can see, there's a lot of modulation. This is all mod wheel dynamics going on over here. So I really wanted it to swell up at the top. So on every instrument, you've got this kind of, if I go open up the modulation controller here, you can see there's this kind of swelling at the beginning. And these notes down here are the key switches, by the way. If you're using key switches, I recommend you stretch the note of the key switch throughout the whole section. That way, even if you played from the middle, you'll still have the right key switch selected. So you can see over here where I muted the notes on the original tracks, and instead I moved them over to this one that has the time rack on it to make it sound, it just sounded better. So now we have the main theme, and for this I'm using a lot of marcato articulations. Here, let me solo the bass. You can hear. And same thing for cellos. Oh, actually going back and forth with the cellos between marcato and spiccato, I believe. It just sounded more natural, like to have some longer notes with marcato and then shorter notes with spiccato. The violas. So you can hear the dynamically, like I got the mod wheel all the way up. I wanted it to sound more intense, just a little bit, with a lot of presence to it. And we have the second violins. I'm using the staccato sample for this. Once again, very dynamic. Okay, and then the first violins are actually not playing at the very beginning, but then they come in with this legato line a second time around. Check it out. So it's right this. And I thought that worked out really nicely over the staccatos and marcatos. So that was the intro, and the melody comes in right here. So this part right over here, I'm using a lot of staccatos on all the instruments other than the first violin, which is playing the melody. So let's just check that out real quick. And the violin is playing this legato melody right here. A lot of dynamics here, just at the very tails of the phrases. So just to, just make it sound more natural at the end of the phrase. And then over here we got a more aggressive run at the. I'm using staccatos with the violins. And then marcatos for the bass, cellos, and violas. And I'm also doubling this with a legato patch that is quite soft. It sounds a little weird on its own, but it just kind of glued everything together a bit. This was also something that I added in a later version of the composition, because at first I had that muted, and then when I sent it to Trolls, we said, yeah, you could try to maybe mess with that, double it, or do something. And I think it works out well together, so this is what it sounds like all together. Okay, then it goes back, same thing. Okay, now we're entering the second part of the composition. Here it gets a little more dramatic, a little more mysterious. I'm using a lot of legato here. The bass, double basses are playing this marcato pattern, but at the same time you've got the cellos playing a melodic line, and then the violas doubling it an octave above. Violas. Violins are playing these high. Here we go back to the spiccato, and violins take over playing the melody, and they're playing these runs. This is the one part where I'm using the minor second trills. Runs. All right, then back to the beginning. Same thing. It basically repeats with a few small changes. And then we get to the third part. This is where it changes. Okay. So here, as you can hear, there's a lot of tremolos. And pizzicato basses. And over here, I'm using the portamento that I showed you earlier to get those really nice big glides between different notes. And the cello's playing the melody. There's a lot of tension there. I'm using some diminished chords and dissonance, but then right over here it becomes more tonal again, and it actually modulates to another key. This is the second melody of the composition. As you can hear, it modulates to a major key. And I also modulated the tempo of the whole project. As you can see right here, the tempo is being modulated just to kind of make it sound more natural, with a little slowdown over here, retard, and then a faster tempo for this second melody right here. Pizzicatos. And I should add that I'm also modulating the entire volume of everything together, the dynamics of all the instruments together, in addition to the individual dynamic modulation, just to kind of make this part breathe a little more and accentuate these swells a little more. All right, so back to the beginning. I wanted this to be pretty dramatic and pretty abrupt, so it ends very softly, but then we go right back to the quick spiccato. Once again, a run with the violins. And then it basically repeats. It's almost the same as the beginning until the very end. At the very end, the tempo goes up, and I bring back that second melody, that major melody that you heard before, but this time with more tension and with violins playing these fast runs the whole time. So let's just jump to the end real quick. Okay, so as you can hear, that's the melody that we had before in that major section that went like this. And I wanted to bring that back at the end, but of course it's way more dramatic here because it is the end of the piece, and I wanted it to sound big. Violins are, both first and second violins are playing these runs the whole time, which I doubled with another patch as well, just to kind of glue everything together. I did modulate the levels of the violins, kind of bring them down here, because I didn't want the runs to completely obscure the melody itself, which is being played by the cellos. Altogether, it sounds like this. And very dramatic big ending. And that's basically it. So the way I wrote this is I just started one section at a time. I usually start with a piano and I play everything, or I'll just start, in this case I started actually with a string patch, a sustained string patch, or one where I could play, you know, all the parts at the same time to compose it. I just find it easier that way. Then I break it down and I separate the different instruments. I choose the right articulations. I hope you like the piece. I haven't given it a name yet. I'll have to think about that. If you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments. I gotta say, I'm really blown away by this library. I have a lot of string libraries, but there's something about this one that just sounds so expressive. I just love the dynamic range and just the passion that is in every single note. So these patches, you'll be able to use them as well, the ones I created for this composition. And the only effects on them actually are a little bit of EQ, a little bit of reverb, and key switches, so you have multiple different articulations. That's basically it. Very simple, but very effective, I think. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope you found this helpful. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again to Trolls for the cool opportunity to do this. I had so much fun with it. And thank you again for watching. I'll see you guys next time.